Welcome to our video series, Ask an Expert. How can providers better promote and provide problem gambling services to Asian American community members? This series is a collaboration between the Division on Addiction at Cambridge Health Alliance, a Harvard Medical School teaching hospital, Health Resources in Action, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Office of Problem Gambling Services. We are partnering to provide capacity building and technical assistance for gambling treatment in Massachusetts. In this video, I interview Dr. Carolyn Wong about casino gambling and the Boston Chinatown community. Dr. Wong is a research associate at the University of Massachusetts Boston's Institute for Asian American Studies. Her research focuses on immigration, citizenship, political empowerment, and health disparities. She previously led a study in partnership with the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center titled Casino Gambling: Community Voices from Boston Chinatown. We hope you enjoy this video.
Thanks so much for joining me today, Dr. Wong. So you recently conducted a study that examined casino gambling among ethnic Chinese individuals living and working in Boston Chinatown. Before we discuss your findings, I'd like to point out that people often talk about Asian Americans as if they are a homogeneous group. What should mental health treatment providers know about the diversity of the Asian American community?
Yes, it's very important to know that the Asian Americans in the United States come from East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, many different countries. In the U.S., the census reports acknowledge more than 30 Asian American groups, and some of the largest ones in Massachusetts are the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Asian Indians, and another Southeast Asian group that's very important to know about are the Cambodians, who have a fairly large community in Lowell. So the experiences are diverse. Some people from Asia came many generations ago and are came for different reasons. In the last, since the late 20th century, people may have come to join family, for jobs or education. And then many of the Vietnamese and Cambodians came as refugees from war situations. So the experience in their homeland and the immigrant experience strongly impacts the types of opportunities and stresses they face here. And that's an important thing to understand for why people may gamble and why people may have problems with gambling too much. And so, yes, I think that the diversity across the ethnic groups and within them is very important for a provider to understand and inquire about, ask about the particular background of a client and not sort of assume that they are all the same.
Great. Thank you so much. That was an insightful answer. So the public health model of problem gambling emphasizes a relationship between the gambler, the game, and the social and physical environment. So let's talk first about the environment. Are there social and physical aspects of the environment in Boston's Chinatown that increase the risk for problem gambling?
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying not only is there diversity, as we just talked about, across the ethnic groups, the Asian groups, but also within the Chinese in particular. There are quite a few well-educated professionals of Chinese descent in Boston and around the country. And in the cities, in the large cities, there are also large numbers of low-income immigrant Chinese. In fact, in Boston, in Chinatown, which is downtown, a downtown neighborhood, the community has one of the highest poverty rates in the city. And this is actually true of other cities in the United States, including New York. Asian Americans have the highest poverty rate in New York City. So many people don't realize that. They have the image that the Asians are college educated and well off. But we chose to do our study in Boston Chinatown because there were a lot of low income, low wage workers there. And many of them live quite stressful lives. Their jobs are hard. Some of them work long hours in restaurants as cooks or waiters, or in retail, what we now call essential workers. Some of them work 6 days a week, maybe 10 hours a day. And it's manual work, low paid, not unionized for the most part. And so that was one of the reasons we decided to do our study in Chinatown, because many more of this segment of the Chinese population are at risk for problem gambling than other more comfortable people in the ethnic community. The community itself is quite crowded, densely populated. People often have lived in the past in multi-generational households, but because of gentrification, many people can't afford the rents anymore because of its downtown location. But there are a number of senior subsidized housing buildings there. And those people in the senior buildings, some of them go off into the casinos that are accessible. The community also, because of the language background and the poverty rate and history of discrimination, is quite isolated socially and linguistically from the rest of the city. That's not to say that people don't have ties with the rest of the city, but some of the low income folks don't feel comfortable, just going outside if they don't speak outside the neighborhood. If they don't speak English. There are fewer recreational opportunities, especially culturally relevant or culturally familiar activities in Chinatown. Some of our participants in our study said, when they were in China, they could go to a community center for adults, play volleyball, play cards, watch movies. Here, that kind of center is more often for youth. In the United States, there aren't that many adult recreational centers like that. And they miss that. And they miss having movie theaters. There used to be movie theaters for Chinese movies in Chinatown. And so going to the casino is one of the things that they can do. So those are some of the factors, I think. One other thing to mention is that there's no green space in Chinatown for outdoor exercise. The only place where people play volleyball or basketball in Chinatown is right next to a highway, a big highway with lots of pollution. So the lack of recreational opportunities, the jobs that people do, the crowded living conditions, these are all factors that I think add to the stress that is are risk factors for problem gambling.
Thank you so much. So let's move on to the gambler. So your research has examined some of the psychological and cognitive risk factors associated with problem gambling among ethnic Chinese individuals in Boston Chinatown. What are some of these risk factors? For example, are there any beliefs about gambling and Chinese culture that providers should factor into their treatment plans for Chinese clients?
Yeah, I think gambling has long been a popular recreational activity in Chinese society. But gambling in homes and gambling in neighborhoods outside in parks, people play play dice games, tile games, card games for low stakes. It's a social kind of gambling. It's very different from the casino style gambling. And this is something I think that providers should understand, because gambling has been, fun for people to do on holidays, at home, in clubs and associations for a long time. But usually it's small stakes, for a few coins or something like that. Or people might gamble for a little bit more, but it's not risky gambling in the same way that casino gambling is for many people. And because of that, I think the casinos have understood that gambling culture, sometimes people believe in numerology. And it may not be a deeply superstitious belief, but it just may be fun to think about, this number is lucky for gambling and this number isn't. So that's a part of the culture. But our research participants were quite clear in saying that they really reject the stereotype that Chinese are just born gamblers or Chinese are gamblers. And I think that's important for people to know. While some people who play the small stakes games may think and believe that, it's good for their mind to keep it sharp, especially seniors. And, we know this in senior centers. Many seniors of all racial ethnic backgrounds play mahjong, the tile game. And it's fun and keeps people sharp. But I think that you mentioned, psychological or cognitive risk factors. If people are under stress and gambling to relieve stress in their lives, they could fall into sort of a magical thinking about their skill at winning is greater than it actually is. And I think that's something to keep in mind because of the popularity of gambling in the culture overall. That's something that to have a nuanced view of people playing games for fun and to keep sharp. They think that's keeping them sharp or keeping them young is quite popular, but it's quite different from the kind of gaming environment that they will encounter or they may go to enjoy in a casino.
Great, thank you for that. So now let's talk about the game itself. In your report, you discuss casinos using targeted marketing strategies and offering incentives to draw in Chinese patrons. What do providers need to know about these practices?
Okay. The incentives are not that different in some respects. Free money to gamble. If you go in, you have a certain amount of credits. You can get a VIP status if you gamble a certain amount, and then it gives you more credits. I think these are available to all people. But I think that the appeal and the tailoring to the Chinese patrons is very important to understand. So for one, going back to something I said earlier about people with low-wage jobs who face discrimination, prejudice in their life, or just have a very hard time. Some of these workers in Chinatown are serving customers in the restaurant for long hours. For them to be able to go to the casino and be served, that's appealing. They can sit there. If nobody's throwing them out, they can sit there for as long as they want. Although some of our participants remarked that there really wasn't any place to sit and just relax that wasn't right next to the table games, there weren't very many places. You had to sort of stand, and even though they were accompanying their spouse at the beginning, they started gambling because there wasn't that much else to do there. There are usually whole sections of a casino, the large casino, that are dedicated to Chinese games, table games. That is appealing because you can, the people who are there are from the same background. The dealers are Chinese or Chinese speaking, and the games themselves have a theme that they're familiar with. As I said, they're not the same as the card games they may be playing at home, but there's some clear similarities. And I think that's part of the marketing strategy of the casinos is to promote and tailor those games. If you look at the websites of any major casino in the United States, they'll have those games advertised. The incentives are even greater if people can get free and easy transportation to the casino. A lot of people in the city, they don't drive. Chinatown is very close to the newer casino Encore in Boston Harbor. But people getting off of work or getting off of lunch being served at these senior centers can pretty much depend on being able to walk maybe a couple blocks across the street and get on a free shuttle. Because the casinos provide, almost continuous free shuttles from Asian American communities in Chinatown, but also near the Chinese community in Quincy, the Vietnamese community in Dorchester. The shuttles circle around and go to Encore, but also to the casinos in Connecticut, Foxwoods, and Mohegan Sun. So these are incentives for people to go. They're targeted marketing towards the ethnic community and free and easy transportation.
Thank you. Now, your research highlights the importance of understanding and respecting Chinese family values while treating problem gambling. What should treatment providers know about the role of the family and the ethnic Chinese community? And how should providers include the family in the treatment process?
Yes, this is something that is very important to take into account. Many times, because gambling problems or gambling addiction is stigmatized, and many Chinese really don't, the idea of going to a psychological, for an interview or to see a counselor for mental health problems, it's frightening and unfamiliar to them. And so we often will find that the relative of a person who has a gambling problem will come in first. And I think that the providers should then need to figure out how to counsel the relative, but also how to encourage the person who has the gambling problem to come in, and not just once, but come in more than once. And one thing that is important to, I think, talk about gambling problems in a way that's non-threatening, that emphasizes the importance of harmony in one's life, balance, healthful living, and not just a overly simplified or kind of didactic measure, don't gamble. And I think working that out with the relatives is important. Another thing to keep in mind is that if a person with gambling problems does come in, or maybe they're seeing a counselor for other reasons, they may hint at the gambling problem that they have, and often indirectly by talking about the impact of some of their activities on family and finances. So it's sometimes easier to talk about how a gambling problem may be affecting a child's opportunity or savings to go to college than it is to say, I have a gambling problem. And so keep in mind the indirect ways that people might express these concerns or problems that they have. And finally, I would say that many people don't have a family here. Many immigrants come. Older immigrants may be alone. Younger ones may have come for a job and not have family. And so you can't assume that everybody has a family to fall back on. And that's very important, because if you don't, it could actually be even harder for you. And this is the last thing I want to say, is that, with family and also community, providers can have a real resource. Because in Boston, in Chinatown, also in the Vietnamese community and the Lowell Cambodian community, you have some of the strongest community organizations in the city that serve immigrants, a dense network of service organizations. And they are a resource with families, or if the family is absent, that providers can make referrals and understand better the lives and needs and cultural backgrounds of these clients.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Wong. This conversation has been very insightful. One last question for you. Is there anything that you'd like to promote, or anything else that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Well, this report that we've been talking about is published. It was written by myself and the former executive director and program leader at the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. It's available online, and I can provide a link. It's called Talking About Casino Gambling, Voices from Boston Chinatown. I also have an article that may be of interest about college-age gambling of Chinese and Vietnamese young people who are also at higher risk than others for problem gambling. The slides of different presentations I could try to provide, but I think that reading the report may give you more insight into the things that I've talked about today.
That sounds wonderful. And I would highly recommend anyone watching this video to read the report. I found it very fascinating and insightful. And thank you so much again, Dr. Wong, for taking the time to speak with us. Your expertise is just so valuable. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this interview. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at info@divisiononaddiction.org.